constructed draft that we've had. I'm curious about what this next up-and-coming draft is going to look like, especially with shakeups on college jobs all throughout the week. And Brian Kelly now is another coach that has been fired. But to join us talking about a lot we should expect for the up-and-coming NFL draft, here's John Vogel joining us here on the program. I want to say, John, what I evaluated from this past draft, and correct me if I'm wrong for this, I felt like this was the most roster-constructed draft for a few reasons, because these weren't just wants for a lot of teams. There are a couple of them that wanted these highly talented players, but I felt like this past draft was all about who do we need on defense, who can we possibly get on offense, especially offensive line. You can't go wrong with that. That's a need. And then who's a guy that we can spot right there that can be a diamond that nobody even looked at that could really be impactful for some teams. What did you think of this past draft and what we're seeing right now as we're heading into, after tonight, week 9 in the NFL season?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate the invite. I'm sorry I was a little late in my response team. I'm glad I was able to get on here with you and talk some sports. I think first off, what we kind of saw, it was a reflection of the draft previous to it, in the sense that there were a lot of guys that they targeted. So like 6 quarterbacks in the 2024 draft go in the first 12 picks. It was a little bit opposite of that in this class. Quarterback wasn't necessarily a big target point. Some of that had to do with the talent that was available. I think a lot of it also had to do with the need, right? There were these resurrection projects that we're seeing around the NFL with Sam Darnold, now with Daniel Jones, with Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. It's kind of changed how people are looking at the quarterback position, and they're kind of understanding what some of us, I'm not going to say myself because I really wasn't in this crowd, but as some analysts have said, which is, hey, these quarterbacks are in bad systems. They don't fit what they're trying to ask them to do. You need to put them in the right system with the right setup so they can play to their strengths and not necessarily be the coach's system. The NFL has adjusted really well to that, and that's why we're seeing, the last few years we've seen Lamar Jackson be great. Athletic ability at the quarterback position has kind of become a necessity. It's not just a premium anymore. So the 24 draft was a reflection of the 25 because they said, okay, we filled these needs. We feel really good about our guys we got in 24. So now let's look at the other side of the ball. And I think there were a lot of defensive players that really have stood out in this class. So maybe not great for your fantasy lineups. If you're like a rookie guy in dynasty leagues and stuff, maybe there's not a lot of great options there. But defensively, defenses have gotten better. There's a lot of great rookies that have stepped up across the league. Particularly, the one that pops in my head was from the other night watching Nick Manowari with the Seattle Seahawks on, I think it was Monday Night Football against the Texans. Fantastic. Exactly what we thought he was going to be. So it was really a defensive draft, but I would agree that, we've got these little guys like Harold Fannin has done really well with the Browns in the role that they've asked him to play in. There's several running backs that have kind of popped in different games. Travion Henderson looks really good. Quinshon Judkins with the Browns as well has also been really a phenomenal runner. So, there's been good things. There's been good, roster hits like you kind of pointed to and alluded to. I think that would be pretty fair. In the last 5-6 years, I can't think of one that had better roster fits, more of them, than the last draft.
I'll tell you what, who's fit in really beautifully, and they're stacked in the receiving core. And you know what I'm talking about. Emeka Egbuka and the way that Tampa Baker Mayfield, it's like, even with just decimated with injuries, I get that. But to be willingness to fight on, and then you get someone like Emeka Egbuka on top of Tez Johnson and Jalen McMillan, that I just am like, I'm in awe of what he's been able to do. And Ohio State, they've really produced up some very good wide receivers over the last couple of years. So to have somebody to be plugging in and just doing what he's doing right now, like, it's insane what he's doing. And he's my biggest favorite of Offensive Player of the Year as a rookie. Like that I just think it's incredible what he's done.
Yeah, and every broadcast that you watch with the Buccaneers, every single broadcaster hears the same thing and tells you the same thing. Sometimes broadcasters are, they're open to hyperbole, right? Where they'll kind of exaggerate on some things and make it a little more dramatic. But I think when you hear the same thing being said consistently across the broadcast, this guy is a pro's pro. He has come in here. He's taken a leadership role early. He has picked up the game incredibly well. They're all saying the same thing, so that tells you something right there that, because I don't necessarily have the time to go through all the beats and, every week and figure out all that different stuff on top of scouting an NFL draft class. But when the broadcasts tell you that, when you keep hearing it over and over and over, every time they play, everybody's got the same thing to say. So he's handled himself extremely well in a room that he's needed to, unexpectedly needed to, because that was a room that we came in the year. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, McMillan from last year was phenomenal. And him and Tez Johnson have both stepped up phenomenally for Baker Mayfield. I think that he's a big reason why that Mayfield's kind of in that conversation right now for MVP.
Absolutely. I did want to tap into this for the up and coming draft because I've been paying attention to it all. I had talked with Brian Smith, especially when it comes to the transfer portal and a lot of these other kids up from in college. One of my biggest things is there's been so many shakeups. I mean, you got James Franklin fired at Penn State. Now we just got Brian Kelly, and I'll talk about that on the tail end. But I'm thinking in the quarterback position this year, there are about 3, possibly 4 that can go this year that I feel like can make a difference, and I feel like some can be projects. I don't think it's a knock on them because where you land matters. But I got to say, though, John, and I don't know if you've evaluated this as closely, but after Brian Kelly getting fired at LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, I felt like going into the year, he was going to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in this draft that I felt has the arm, has the accuracy, can be able to move in some spots to open up space. But I watched this LSU offense, and it feels like it's been stagnant a few times. And I'm just kind of like, is that more pertain to the coaching, or is that more of just the offensive play scheme in itself, that it's not kind of clicking? And then, I mean, I'm even watching, too, with Cade Klubnik at Clemson. So how have you evaluated this quarterback class? Because I don't think it's going to be as stacked as it was 2 years ago when we had Caleb, Jaden. How do you kind of evaluate this upcoming year?
Well, so the first thing I think is what we need to look at is the fact that most of these guys that we're talking about being first round top 5 picks right now are probably not coming out this year. Ty Simpson, Fernando Mendoza, right? These guys have an extra year of eligibility. And one of the big things that you need to watch in the news cycle and see how it's kind of developing is the Big Ten with this potential $2 billion tech investment that they're about to get into. If they get into this equity tech type deal, if they get this, that's $2 billion being injected into the Big Ten alone. You know that the SEC is already working on a deal like this too, because the Big Ten's talking about it. These two conferences, they have to match each other. So we're looking at potentially $4 to $5 billion going into the NIL market next year. If that happens, which it's my understanding that it is going to happen, you're going to see $10 million quarterbacks next year in the transfer portal. And the reason for that is it's simple. You got to pay first round money to keep these guys from going to the NFL. And if they got, in this case of Ty Simpson, that helps him because all the guys that we've seen be very successful in the NFL, as soon as they step on the field as a rookie in the last few years, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, those are the guys that kind of come to mind. CJ Stroud, even these guys had 20 plus starts. Bo had 40. Jaden had 40. This is an important aspect to understanding what you're looking at post snap. Watching the play develop. The only adjustment that you have to make at that point is adjusting to the speed of the game. And once you make that adjustment, you're ready to roll. And that's why we're seeing these guys already play really well. Until then, you have these systems like you just mentioned Jackson Dart a few minutes ago before I came on. Dart is playing really well. They've simplified the system for him so that he can speed and catch up to the speed of the game. But he's another guy, 30 plus starts in his career. Yeah. And he might have been close to 40 if I'm not mistaken. So that's the common theme here. for success is a lot of starts in college. So that's going to help these guys when they go back.
Yeah.
When you look at the senior class, that's where things kind of, this is a weird quarterback class. This is very weird. Carson Beck, the first 5 weeks of the year, was like, oh, he shook off his demons and now he's ready to roll. And now we see him go out and throw 4 interceptions against Louisville at home, loses the game, goes and starts off really poor against Stanford last week. And you're just like, he's got the off the field stuff that he's going to have to answer for. There's a lot there with Beck where I don't know if it's football. I don't know if it's mental. I don't know what it is with him that's keeping him from being consistent. Drew Aller. If I'm Aller, I'm applying for a medical transfer as soon as possible, a medical waiver for that injury, because he needs another year. He needs a year away from James Franklin. So James Franklin has traditionally not developed quarterbacks. That's a whole another tangent we can get into at some other point.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the thing here is like, there's not a real standout in this senior class. The guys that, like when I talk with my friends in the league and stuff, the guy that keeps coming up, I don't think he's a first round pick. I don't think he's a day 2 pick, but Diego Pavia has caught everyone's attention because of his moxie, his leadership ability. He's absolutely been the cornerstone at Vanderbilt to flip that program around. Mm-hmm. And he's a rare type of individual that you can bring in there, even as a 3rd string quarterback, as a developmental guy, that's going to be a good presence in your locker room. Because he just does things the right way. I understand people think he's a little bit, he's a little over the top sometimes. And I think the word they've used is arrogant. Anybody around him will tell you that's not the case. And it's really, it's what your teammates think. That's what really matters at the end of the day. So I don't know how to take this quarterback. I still like Nussmeier. I think that you look at his body of work. The Clemson game stands out to me in particular because he's working from a condensed pocket. He's processing really well. I think what kind of plays into his issue is it's not just the coaching. It's not just the play calling. He's been playing through an ankle injury that he suffered during summer training this year. He also is dealing with a rib injury that he sustained while playing through the ankle injury. And then on top of that, that offensive line, there's 4 new starters there. They were starting 2 freshmen at both tackles against Texas A&M the other night. That's just not sustainable for a quarterback of his type. So I want to see him get healthy. I don't think he'll sit out the rest of the year. I don't think that's in his blood to do. But I want to see him go down to the combine. I want to see him go to the Senior Bowl first. Yeah. And I want to see him play well there. And then I want to see him go to the combine and just show everybody that, hey, I can make the throws. Everything's good. And then I want to see him go to his pro day and just solidify that. And I think he's still in the running to be probably the first round quarterback in this class.
I believe so, because ultimately, like many people I've talked to, a lot of fans, they don't quite understand like the entirety of like what the scouting combine is about. Like ultimately, like we know this, just evaluating strictly the position itself. You go into the Senior Bowl, you got your in-game reps, and then you go into the scouting combine. Now you're basically like, you're now trying to just basically evaluate yourself, your arm accuracy, how you really feel like as far as athletically, can you throw the deep ball? Can you extend plays? All those kinds of things. Because by the time you put those pads on in the NFL, those are a lot of the expectations, especially when you get a lot of these offensive-minded coaches that can see that and then find a way to really kind of tweak some things to make it even better. That's why I love the situation with Jackson Dart. Knowing how Brian Dable works on this, I think he's going to have a very good, bright future. One of my things is, I feel like this draft class more in particular, I feel like is going to be more based upon run and secondary. Because to me, the running back class, John, looks really, really prominent. I mean, you got Justice Haynes in Michigan. You got the young kid, that kid at Washington. Oh, my God. The kid's got unbelievable, like lower body strength, cuts, and just his vision when running the football. And then there's a couple of others I can't think of up to mind. But I feel like this is also back-to-back. Some prime running back classes right now that I think could really make a difference for some teams. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the deepest running back classes I've seen. Even if a lot of the juniors go back, the senior class itself is extraordinary. Nick Singleton at Penn State. You mentioned Jonah Coleman's one of my favorites. Dean Connors at Houston. all these guys are NFL guys. And there's an extensive list that we could go into that would take up the rest of your show. I'm going to give you the grace and not do that. But the running back class is great. You got Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame, who's potentially coming out this year. And I mean, he's Bijan Robinson and Adrian Peterson's body. Like, that's who he is. He's a phenomenal player. The running class is great. And then I don't like to use the term generational because I think that's something that's used a lot in our media right now, especially in draft media. It's like every year you've got guys, draft analysts on X and Twitter and in websites and stuff. There's 5 guys in this class that are generational, and it's like, no, dude, these are guys that come around like once every 25 years, right? And so you're lucky if you have a generational prospect every couple of years,
Yeah.
And when you look at Caleb Downs, this might be a generational safety prospect. I mean,
I agree.
The guy does everything, man. One of the things that I saw, I think somebody had responded to something I said about him. And they said, well, I feel like he's not rangy enough. And I was like, dude, did you see him returning punts at Alabama as a freshman? When's the last time you can think of a safety that returned punts?
Right.
You can't. It doesn't happen. He's not. If you watch the 2025 tape exclusively and make your assessment on Downs, you're going to probably think that because he's not playing that role in this defense. Right. He's playing more of a box safety hybrid linebacker role. This guy's 6'1", 205, and he plays like he's 240.
Yeah.
He's got insane physical, brute raw strength. He's a great athlete. I don't think he tests. I'd love to see him. I don't think it happens. But no, this guy is off the charts, unbelievable. So there's a bunch of good corners too in this class. I think that the defensive line group is really good as well. Ruben Bain, the names escape me, the guy at Penn State right now.
Yep.
33. He's really good too. Zane Durant's the other one. He's a defensive lineman on the team. But there's a bunch of great edge rushers in this class as well. Tyreek Sapp at Florida looks like he's probably a guy. So Zion Young at Missouri. So there's going to be I think you'll see a lot of defensive linemen come off the board early. You'll see a couple offensive linemen in there. Downs will come off early, and maybe a couple running backs. And then after that, chaos. It's going to be chaos.
I feel like, even when I watch, the Denver and Dallas game, is that for Dallas, I'm not even going to pick on him. I feel like this year's not their year. However, the picks that they did get back from the Micah trade, you could use that to end up getting a lot of these defensive guys that are capable first and second rounders, and they'll be very impactful. And especially when you need a defensive run stopper, like you need one to just be able to stop the run up on the front, and you need somebody to be able to handle the man-to-man corner type of tasks, especially when that kind of takes some heat off of your secondary from the safeties, because they'll play one of two things. They'll be physical, or they'll be the guy in the free to basically be the spotter of whomever is coming at him left and right. So, I feel like, even with offensive playmakers, I mean, we had a couple of them come out of this past draft. I know Trey Harris is going to have a very good upbringing in the Chargers in the second round. I felt like, Houston, they got very good ones with Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. Like, are we expecting some offensive firepower a little bit? I mean, it may not be as great on tight ends. There are a couple good ones in this draft, but what do you think about just the offensive firepower? Like, there's going to be some teams that are going to want to upgrade up on that.
Yeah, it's not a great wide receiver class. I know that there's several that are being pushed up. I think Cardinal Tate's probably for real at Ohio State.
Yep.
Jordan Tyson is probably going to be more of your second round guy just because he's not a guy that's going to win one-on-one. You have to scheme him open. He's a Deebo Samuel type player. When you kind of get outside of that, you're kind of looking, everybody's kind of got holes in their game that concern you as a wide receiver. So it's not a great class for that. Stowers, I think, is a good tight end. Eli Stowers at Vanderbilt, he might be the best one in this group. And I know that a lot of people consider him more of an H-back. So he'll be a Dalton Kincaid type player at the next level. There's going to be role players that are going to be in this class. at those positions, but I don't think that there's going to be a lot of, star power, like can't miss fantasy guys that are going to put up a lot of stats. I think you're going to see a lot of productive role players that can develop, into really good starters. But nobody really stands out to me outside of Tate. I think Tate is probably going to be a really good one. Everybody else is going to have to kind of work into their roles. It's going to take them some time to adjust. And, that's just how the dice rolls sometimes. I think that I've talked about this theory with the wide receiver position, which is Odell's catch set the wide receiver position on fire. That Sunday night catch in 2015, if you remember that and you think about the wide receiver classes that were coming out back then, you fast forward 3 years and you think three years is those guys leaving high school, going to college, playing 3 years. And for the next 3 years after that, 2019, 2020, 2021, what do we hear every year? This is the most insane wide receiver class I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. A lot of these high school kids didn't want to play wide receiver until they saw Odell do that. And now they want to play wide receiver. So now we're developing wide receivers, right?
Yep.
So now that fatigue is kind of set in, the market's resetting. And so it'll probably be another year before when we get Jeremiah Smith in the next class in 27, Ryan Williams will probably be up there. We got a really good one, DeKeidron Moore and Malachi Toney in 28 or 29, whatever that is. This is just going to be the break year for wide receiver, where it's not going to be as deep, and you're going to see a lot more people targeting veteran talent.
Yeah, no, 100%. And especially for teams that we know that are deficient on defense, they're going to need to add some guys up on there that could really be explosive. But even if you get just those two up and in particular, maybe even one more up from there, and especially when you got an offense that is set, that is looking for something extra, that could often really help out for just a complete type of offensive, just roster from top to bottom. That's the team that we know capable of scoring up at least 25 plus points a game. So that's ultimately
Jake, if you get into this off season and you're 2 or 3 players away from being able to make a run, you're going to be in really good shape with this class, because you're going to have the guys that you're going to be able to fill in that you can't get in free agency. I do want to go back to the Cowboys real quick, because you brought them up, and the Cowboys have one of the most puzzling roster strategies I've ever seen.
Yes.
With the quarterback, contract. There was talk of them trading him in the offseason. That was legitimate. That just nobody has the cap space to take on, $60 million a year. And even if you offset some of that, it is a lot, of money to put into one guy. And then, you turn around, you'd say you can't pay Micah Parsons. Now that pick, you hope you get a good pick back. But right now you're looking like you might be picking 32 with that. Not making any prediction here, but I'm just saying that if you look at the records, it's them and the Colts. They're the best teams in football right now. So you could be picking 32 there. So you hope you can get a good guy there. It's not going to be, you're not getting a Micah Parsons, but you're hoping that you can get somebody there. But then you trade Micah Parsons and you turn around and you sign Deron Bland to a $26 million a year deal, which I get it. Deron Bland, great slot corner. Right. But you pointed out that the boundary doesn't look good, right? Deron can't play the boundary very well.
Nope.
That he's pretty much exclusively a slot guy. And you said you couldn't pay Micah because he'd missed some games. He'd missed 5 games in his career?
Yep.
Deron just missed all of last year. Jake, make it make sense to me. I don't see the roster construct. So yeah, in theory, you have extra picks. You can build the roster up the right way. But with some of the decisions that you've made already, I that's a project that I wouldn't want to touch.
And that's the thing about it is because ultimately what's off the table is Arch Manning. I don't even want to hear the conversation ever again. You got a franchise quarterback. Dak looks rejuvenated and he looks to be your franchise guy. Stick with that. The only thing about it is you need to have the ability to stop the run. You got Kenny Clark, but you're going to need somebody next to him to be that next brutal force up front that will be your future, because you already lost to Marcus Lawrence and you lost Micah Parsons. So you need to have somebody up from on there. I think Donovan Ezraku is a nice piece, but he is going to need more development until he is comfortable in his own. But even with that, the corners Like, everybody's just cooking up on these corners. And that's where I'm just like, for me, originally what I thought of that kid Muhammad from Texas. But then I thought of, there's a couple more I wasn't even thinking about that can be very impactful. But if you get those guys, I felt like, to me, I like Trayvon Diggs, but there's even a part of me that I'm feeling like you could get some sort of value for him. Because ultimately, you need to really reconstruct this whole defense. So if you get something for him, maybe even if you get a second and possibly a third rounder, you are in the middle of the pack where you can get more impactful guys. So that was where I was with them. But it's going to be interesting, though, the up-and-coming draft. But I will say this, my last thing. Is it safe for me to say, because I've already stamped my mark on this, when he's ready, John Mateer, number 1 overall. I think he really, I just look at Herbert and Bo Nix basically formed together. Accurate up on passes, can basically scramble more outside to create space. But he's also somebody, and I know he came back from an injury. I'm not going to put that up on him. But I do think the accuracy, and I think the field of vision for him seems a lot like those two quarterbacks I mentioned. I don't think he'll have the athletic ability close to a Herbert, but close to along the lines. I think he's able to do things that I thought Arch Manning would have done this year. And I'm like, I have to really reconsider about that. What do you think?
It's tough because the system that he runs is really hard to evaluate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of designed quarterback runs. They use him a lot in quarterback power. And sometimes he shows you a flash and you're like, maybe this guy is a really good athlete. You know, he's got great lateral ability. His jump cut is really something else. It's the rest of the game, I think, that worries me, Jake. Did he rush himself back from this injury? Is that going to provide a long-term consequence? Because those last 4 or 5 throws against Ole Miss, when he got up in the 40, 45 attempt range, were pitiful.
Oh, yeah.
Again, one game, right? And not counting the Texas game. So 2 games since he's been back. So I wonder if he rushed himself back. I don't want to necessarily evaluate that, because for the same reason that I don't want to take away from what, Garrett Nussmeier can do with, his ability to operate from the pocket. He's hurt. He's playing through it. I want to give him credit for that. And I want to look at the stuff that he does really well and say, yeah, when he's healthy, this is what he looks like. Right. So I want to do the same for Mateer. I'm not sure if I'm in on him even being a first round pick yet. And that's just because of those questions. It's very difficult to evaluate with that system.
Yeah.
It's kind of a pistol. It's a heavy pistol, heavy RPO kind of offense. It's not something you see a lot in the NFL. Sometimes they have some plays that develop down the field. He does flash. But he's probably a year away. He probably comes back next year, especially if this money. I'm telling you, Jake, this is the biggest story that if you're following college football, you need to be paying attention to, because if this happens, the NIL market is going to go absolutely bonkers, and it's going to be a lot more profitable for a lot of these guys to stay in college as opposed to going to the NFL, and they will do that. When you think about a $2 billion deal, the Big Ten's 18 schools?
Yep.
You split that 18 ways, it's practically an NFL salary cap.
Yeah.
They're going to spend NFL money, and that's what we're looking at potentially in college football. And so if that happens, man, that's the story of the year. And I'm really surprised not a lot more people are paying that much attention to it, and kind of is almost like a hushed conversation. But that's what everybody really needs to pay attention to, because that's what's going to tell us how many underclassmen will enter this class if these deals go through. That's the big question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep up with a lot of my reliable resources, because my biggest thing is that I'm big on experience, I'm big on reps, and I'm all like, again, these players got to get paid. And I get that. And I know that that's a challenging thing for a lot of these coaches. But ultimately, the game plan's never changed. Get your production up and out on the field. Ultimately, you are going to be an NFL draft prospect. But the fact of the matter is, you're coming to a lot of these programs, especially when you're in the bigger schools like Bama and Ohio State and, all these other places. But ultimately, you're working towards your own draft stock for these other teams that, when you get put into that position, there's going to be a lot more higher expectation. But if they get their mind right on it, and at the same time, they've learned from what they got up in college, this is why the NFL is just continuing to be king every single year. And it's just because of things like that. John, I appreciate you for coming on by, man. One of my most reliable guys I'm going to have to look towards when we get ready to go back into Indianapolis. Because, listen, people have been telling me all the time. They're like, Jake, you need to get your butt down here in Indianapolis. Seriously, just go watch a combine. You'll be right there closest with the coaches. You get a chance to see these guys in action and just really being even up into your role where you're analyzing these guys. You're kind of thinking, what's the strength? What's a little bit of the tendencies they can work on? Those little things, because that's where, okay, now I know how to evaluate that player and whether or not he will be impactful and what his career will look like in the future. So, John, appreciate you for coming on by, man. Great stuff from you. Hope to have you back up on here soon as we get closer to the next draft.
Thanks, Jake. Let me throw one thing in here real quick about Indianapolis. It's for not just for you, anybody that might be listening that wants to check it out. I can't recommend it enough. And even if you don't get a media credential, it's absolutely worth the week to go there, because most of the action doesn't happen inside the media room or where you can get a media credential. Most of the action is happening in the interviews. That's where you get some of your intel. Now, it's been in Indianapolis that I've made some of my best friends in the industry. Bar side conversations with guys that you never thought you'd be having a bar side conversation with, and then walking away keeping in touch afterwards because that conversation was so important and valuable to each one of you. It's a beautiful thing. Football brings us all together. It separates it takes all the things that separates us out of the equation, and we all come together for the sport. And there's no better place than Indianapolis where you see it in action every single day. Can't recommend it enough. Even if you just hang out in downtown and hit some bars, and dude, it's awesome. You won't believe the people that you run into and that you talk to, and the potential friends that you make.
Absolutely, man. And I got so many really good close friends, even up and into this industry, man. And I'm always so delighted to even just know more about it, because again, these are going to be guys that I'm like, initially I will text and say, what is this guy that I need to know in order for me to understand what some teams could be looking up at, that whole full evaluation. But yeah, it's a fun time. Definitely got to make my trip out there. Appreciate you, John, for coming on by, man. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we will definitely see you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jake.
Absolutely. There you go. Player evaluations, it never gets old, and it's fun. It really is. I mean, yeah, the generational talent,